If you listen to the show, you already know that we cannot exist without our sponsors. They are the ones who make things happen behind the scenes. So let's acknowledge Fuji Sports. We've been working with these guys for a while now, not only as far as this podcast is concerned, but also at the RŌL Academy. We've had their gear. I personally use their gis. What a phenomenal product.
Yeah, I mean, jiu-jitsu, judo, MMA, tape, bags, anything you need for your jiu-jitsu journey, you can find at fujisports.com.
Let's talk RŌL TV. There's so much content on there. It's ridiculous at this point. But I think what is even more intriguing, as time went on during the project, we've been recording most of the events that were taking place here at RŌL Academy. At this point, I mean, we have guys like Chris Howder, Armin Fati, Rafael Lovato Sr., and Pete the Greek. I mean, there were so many different events that we've kind of recorded it. Don't you think that's amazing? I mean, points of reflection and kind of going back for all the students to see what really happened and refresh their memory.
Yeah, I think it's great, you know, being able to go back and look at all these high-level practitioners, Octavio Cudo, like one of the names you didn't mention. And I mean, just these guys that have been doing this for so long come in, teach these amazing seminars and workshops, and it's all recorded and there for you to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you want to get additional savings on all this, type in code RŌL Radio at the coupon and get additional 30% off of your membership.
Nice. Go to rolacademy.tv. What's up, everyone, and welcome back. If you haven't already, please hit the like, share, subscribe, download, listen, and whatever other button there is, and leave a review wherever you do listen. This ensures that we can continue bringing you the great guests and content that you have come to expect. Today's guest takes a deep dive into the modern-day jiu-jitsu instructor in a digital landscape, AI and its role in the future of jiu-jitsu, the importance of community, and more. Here is the RŌL Radio with entrepreneur, 4th degree BJJ black belt, MMA coach, and the creator of Plus BJJ, returning guest, Stephen Whittier.
Welcome to RŌL Radio.
And we are, I stumbled on that one. And we are live. Stephen, how are you? Great to see you back to the show, returning in. I'm glad to have you here. And right before we started recording this, I mentioned that I feel like you never stop. I feel like you always doing something. And like it, like no matter like what I do and where my internet searches pop up and wherever I go, boom, here he is again, and here he is again. It's like, do you ever stop, or are you really, really so immersed into these projects that you are involved in?
It never stops, for good or ill. But it was interesting that you said that. I think that's good to know, because honestly, I've been so immersed in a number of projects that have been so labor intensive that I've not been really up on my kind of external promotion game, for things like my instructionals and things. I've kind of slid back a little bit. So it's good that I guess my name is still out there. But yeah, it's always busy for sure.
Well, and speaking of instructionals, literally right before you got on, I went to BJJ Fanatics. I often do that, and I just looked, and I feel like the list of your instructional is like just never ending. Like, you have a lot of stuff out there.
Yeah, I have a lot, and I have a full battery of new stuff planned. It's just been a matter of getting to it, because I've had some other, pressing things as we were chatting about. But and then I also had a wrist injury, which is still kind of nagging. And so I actually kind of postponed filming some new instructionals. But yeah, I got a lot of stuff that I do want to do. That part never ends. It's what keeps it exciting. I remember at one point, I went up to meet with, this is some years ago, back when, like, for instance, the BJJ Fanatics, like, their podcast was really early. I think I was like in the first 10 or 12 people that did a podcast with them. So it was a while ago. But at that point, I met with Mike, Zenga, and Bernardo. Mike in particular, I've been close with since way before Fanatics. He's such a great guy. And, but we had a little meeting and stuff. And at that point, Bernardo was like, oh, I was just running the stats. And, you're in our top 20 producers for instructionals. And I was like, oh, well, that's pretty cool. And then all of a sudden, Gordon Ryan happened and all those other guys came in. I went way down. But it is still good to know that I'm still helping people out. And, every once in a while when I think, everything's crickets, then I still get people will pop up on a fairly regular basis and say, oh, wow, this really helped change my perspective on the art. And in some cases, people have said, I think I was ready to throw in the towel. And then I caught this thing, an email of yours, or I saw one of your instructionals, somebody referred me to or whatever. And now I'm back in and I'm so glad. So things like that are very meaningful to me.
Many consider or think about being an instructor, a full-time instructor, as we hyper-focus on teaching only, teaching a class in our own academy or whichever academy we find ourselves in. Would you agree that it's way beyond that? I mean, teaching is just a small part of the impact that we are trying to make, especially with the technology available to us today?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. This is a story, I think, I speak mostly to my ecosystem where I spend most of my time in. I'm either, it's family, it's business, and it's my school. And then I've got clusters of associates, friends, and everything, like training partners I came up with. Now, I'm part of the SBG organization. So I've got like my whole ecosystem of like what was called the Boston BJJ network under Roberto Maya, is my instructor. He was the godfather of New England jiu-jitsu. So I've got that. I've got my Muay Thai family, and then I've got like the SBG family. Nowadays, kind of like mostly just doing my thing with my own students and friends. And then at least a couple times a year, whether I'm doing seminars or going to training camps with SBG. So that's where I spend most of my time. But I also talk to other people outside of my little ecosystem. And I think in the healthy communities within, because there's always some negativity and some bullshit, right? But in the healthier communities, you see the same thing over and over again. This is like something that people will come into in a lot of cases somewhat casually, very much of a kind of a hobbyist mindset. And then it becomes part of their life and fundamentally changes their life. And so much of that comes from things that you didn't anticipate. It wasn't the goals that you stated you were learning martial arts for. It is the relationships and the self-learning, self-discovery, the experiences you have along the way. See people meet each other through jiu-jitsu and get married, or meet each other, they become like best friends and wind up, spending all their time with these people outside. It becomes their social circle. So yeah, it's unbelievable. And there's obviously, people will finally have some discipline that clicks with them, where if they were unhealthy before, had some bad habits, it's that discipline and love of the game and love of the people and everything that inspires them, that lets them, have a healthier lifestyle or beat addiction, you name it. You've heard all these stories. So for sure, it's bigger than just teaching. Yeah.
Do you feel that today, because of the technology impact that's surrounding us, there is more pressure on instructors to have a more, let's just say, global approach to all of this? And so let me pre-frame this in the sense of 20 years ago, if one was to be an instructor or was in that job, likely he was doing this part-time, but his focus was really narrow to that 10, 20, 30, 50, 70, 80, 100 students that he had locally within that little bubble that you just spoke about. Do you feel that today there is that overall pressure on all instructors to deliver some digital content, to be on Instagram, answer questions, being involved in these multiple bubbles, or even outside of their own bubble, in order for them to bring value?
Yeah, that's a good question. There may be. I think to some extent everybody's going to feel that, just insofar as the digital landscape is part of just marketing your business now, like promotion for your business. So in some way, shape, or form, even if you're very technology averse, you realize that just like you need to have a website for your business in almost all cases, you used to need to have a Yellow Pages ad or something. Now you need to have a website, and you need to have a social media presence.
Yeah.
So if you don't, it's like, that's where people are, so they can't find you. So there's at least that. There, I don't know, because obviously I have been public since whenever it was, 2011, I think, with 40 Plus BJJ and all that stuff with my online stuff. So I've been in that world already, so I can't really speak to everybody if they feel like they need to be an influencer of some sort.
Yeah.
But that may very well be the case. It is an interesting question.
Don't you feel that we've always been influencers in some sense, just a different platform?
For sure. Yeah. I think what's fascinating is when you said sort of like global, to be out there and outside your market in a big way.
Yeah.
That's the interesting question.
Yeah.
I'd almost love to see people surveyed on that to see what they say.
Yeah. By the way, I gotta show you something. Hold on a second. Look what I have.
Ah, cool. That's the original.
This is completely coincidental. On my desk right here.
Old school, yeah.
Old school. Oh yeah. That's DVD for those of you who don't know. Like, you had to put a thing into a thing to watch it.
Right. Yeah.
But that's always an interesting how all of this continues evolving, and I feel like when we look at other generations, our parents or our grandparents, things they evolved much slower than what we are experiencing. I mean, literally in a decade or two, this thing shifted from completely non-digital environment to 100% digital. I mean, there's like complete 360 turn in the way how we not only do business, but also how we communicate and impact other people.
Yes, absolutely.
Is that difficult to make that adoption, if you will, to make that pivot point, or multiple pivot points all throughout that time?
It was challenging. I think there's a lot of fear of the unknown. Also putting yourself out there publicly. Everybody has varying degrees of imposter syndrome. I think even people that try and pretend that they don't, they feel that initially. And also nowadays, I think there's a little bit of a probably some intimidation around the fact that people see what happens to other people that put them out there publicly, because you look at YouTube comments, or I don't spend much time on Reddit at all, but like anytime I go on Reddit, it's like just the amount of haters and trolls and things like that. So I think probably some hesitation from people there too, that if they do put anything public out there, there's always going to be somebody with the snarky comment, or putting them down or something. But if you have something valuable, you have some experiences, you have some knowledge that's going to be valuable to other people, then I would say just go ahead and do it.
That's part of the challenge, right? I mean, it's not only, forget about digital work for a second, forget about doing instructionals, like forget about all these big projects, but even stepping in front of a class, I mean, that is opening yourself up for a criticism. That's opening yourself up for trolls and all these people who are superheroes behind the keyboard, right? I mean, that's big part of this, right? So like having that point of awareness that you're putting yourself in a vulnerable position in order for you to impact others, it takes a lot of courage, doesn't it?
Yes. I mean, jiu-jitsu takes that because, by its very nature, again, it's possible to have there's certainly instances of people I can think of that sort of do it for the wrong reasons in some fundamental way, where they maintain a huge ego all the way through. But by and large, we all know that if you're doing jiu-jitsu or MMA or any functional martial art, right, like it's a humbling process, because you're going to fail. And as a matter of fact, becoming really good is constitutive of like, you have to fail hundreds, thousands of times over the years in order to get good, because you're putting yourself in a live environment, not just a theoretical scripted environment. So what you're talking about, I think it's a big portion of when I do instructor training, and we have, the whole course for it. And when people get very nervous and have trouble with the presentation piece, a lot of times you're looking at, look, if you've got all the other things, like you're really passionate about it, you're caring about it, you're the type of person who would take somebody new under your wing without being asked and make them feel comfortable, and you love sharing information, then if you have all those other criteria, then we can work on the fear of being public speaking and presenting in public. We can work on that. Because if you have all the other attributes, those are the great raw materials. And sometimes you have to remind them, like, look, what you're nervous about being vulnerable is you've already done that just by being in here and being a student and training for a while, and now, earning belts and everything. Like, you had to already have a degree of humility. Have humility about this too. You don't need to be perfect. Like, if you are in the middle of an explanation and you have a brain fart, call out your brain fart. Be like, well, I just totally lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
Where was I?
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
You were paying attention. Great. Let's,
Yeah.
and then you're right back. You make a joke about it. Like, no big deal, as opposed to freezing. Little things like that can really help people. And then, just like in terms of training itself, you'll notice that they get some small wins as you start to ease them into the process. And then next thing you know, fast forward a year, they're in command of that class in a very healthy way, not an authoritarian way, and everything. Yeah. And they feel good, like they've really earned that, just like they earned their skills.
Yeah, for multiple reasons. One, they are impacting others, but two, the growth that they have explored or discovered, it's quite tremendous, right? I mean,
yes.
these are like big victories, in my opinion. It's not easy to be in front of a class and share your perspective, essentially, right? I mean,
right. Yeah.
That's deep. That's deep. And you just mentioned an instructor program. I just wrapped up mine in the Mine Academy literally last week, and
oh, great!
It is mind blowing how the individuals who come in and the concerns they have, the being scared, being vulnerable, being very subconscious of what they are about to do, and the end of the course, just by practicing, just by simply following the recipe in a sense and looking for advice and being vulnerable to feedback, the growth that they can introduce is such a tremendous change. It's like you're almost looking at different humans, isn't it?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's phenomenal. Like, we just had I told them as well, like, one of many examples, but we had a student, I would say, kind of came in on the, like, self-effacing to the point of almost tending to put himself down a little bit, and like lacking confidence, and showed up a lot, but not particularly confident. And then prepared for a first tournament. And it was one of those things where it's like, yeah, you can go in, try and manage expectations. Like, I wasn't going to tell him not to compete, but it's like you could see the hesitation even in prep to go for that first tournament. And also a little bit under condition for the weight class. So anyway, just sort of, sometimes you just let people go in and have an experience. And he did not do well. And then after that, though, you saw, like, have a little follow-up chat and everything, and kind of say, like, so here's what I think, could make this a lot better for you and everything. And man, like, dieted down, had sort of a long-term focus out, like, I'm going to do this again in 6 months, really focused on the process. And then, like, went in the next time and dominated the next division, like, against some really, some pretty good competition too. Now we're talking about like a white belt at the time, is now a blue belt. Right. But to your point, that wasn't so much an instructor thing, but I am looking at this person to now become a coach, because I've seen such a profound transformation in him that I, like, in the passion, I'm like, you could absolutely transfer that to other people, and you've got a story now, firsthand experience. But it wasn't about the win per se. That was awesome to, like, show up and, get a gold medal, have a bunch of matches, and be so dominant. that's always cool. But for me, is what I told him. I was like, dude, it wasn't about your medal. It was about, like, you're a different human than you were last year. Even 6 months ago, you're a different human. I'm just really proud of you because, we can create the environment, but you did that. Like, you went and put yourself through that process. And it was one of the best transformations I've seen in recent memory among my students. So it just goes to show what's possible, and you talk to 100 instructors and you'll have like 1,000 stories like that. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Would you agree that a lot of this is all about attitude versus the gain skill?
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. I do this exercise during my instructor program where I ask the entire class to throw a random terms describing the ideal and perfect instructor, and we write them out on the
We do the
whiteboard.
same thing.
You do the same thing?
We do the same thing. Yeah.
And then you split them into skill and
Yes,
attitude.
yes, exactly.
And I tell them every time, 1 year this will fail. 1 year this will fail. But up to this point, it's always attitude. It's always
we've never had it not be attitude. Yeah.
I know, same thing for me and for us, and it's but it's really eye-opening for these individuals to look at it from that perspective, because they look up to the instructors as somebody who is extremely skilled, somebody who has a certain knowledge base, somebody who has a certain experience, but almost all of it feeds into this attitude of one being humble, being very approachable, and so on, and the list just keeps going and going and going, and it's such an interesting perspective to see that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's pivot this a little bit. You recently, so I just found out that you moved an academy in your location. Congratulations on the headache.
Thank you very much.
And the madness that's associated with this.
It was madness because we were under the gun. Essentially, I had a pretty good long-standing, like an industrial park space, 18 years, and long-standing relationship with the landlord and everything. But unexpectedly, as he got older, he just couldn't handle dealing with the property anymore. So put it on the market. And I won't go into all the ins and outs and bore people, but it was, if you are an instructor and you are don't own your building, if you're leasing, renting your space, this is one of those things where it was forced growth. Let's put it that way, because commercial real estate does tend to move fairly slowly compared to residential in a lot of cases, but very quickly it was like, we put it up for sale, we got a cash offer, we want to close, we kind of need you out. And I got a little bit of an extension, but where I'm at, there is not there's just not a ton of suitable, affordable real estate for our purposes. Pretty much everything around that would be suitable space for us was prime retail, where people are looking for over $30 a square foot, not counting triple net costs and everything, and it was just insane. So we finally were able to get a spot. It was a little bit of a travel, so we also had to deal with students, having to make a commute because it wasn't within the same town. So, but we did get a nice space. The biggest part of the story, though, bringing back to what we were just talking about, is my people stepped up in the biggest way to make sure that we could make that transition. So we were only closed for classes for like less than a week. And we did this in record time, moved out of one facility over to the other, build out inspections, everything. And I just had my students and my friends like just come in like full steam and help make sure we could get everything done. It was really phenomenal. And
that's
grateful.
Unheard of. You were only down for just a handful of days.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you're a lucky cat.
Yes. Yeah.
But that's a big move, oftentimes underestimated when it comes to running business. Like, excuse me, our students come into the academy, they learn jiu-jitsu, they come to classes, do whatever is being offered. Obviously they pay their tuition, but oftentimes, we forget as a student, as a client, these other things they have behind the scenes. And I mean, having a space is one of them. And if that space is being questioned or in some way removed from us, I mean, that puts us in a heavily compromised position. I mean, that's a lot of stress, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's, somewhat, when it comes to the business, it's somewhat existential stress, but we made it through. there is always a way. It just sometimes it's a stressful, sometimes it's very stressful, but there is always a way. And, again, people will also surprise you. If you care about people, I tend to try and solve most of my problems, sometimes to my detriment. I try and kind of solve them all by myself. I'll ask people, but I'm pretty much like, I'm just going to take care of this. I'm not going to inconvenience somebody else. But when I sort of told my inner circle, like, hey, here's what we're dealing with right now. And, I've got a lot to digest, a lot to make happen and everything. It was just really wild to see those people just go, yeah, I mean, how can I help? Like, or in some cases, not even say, don't tell me you're all set. Here's what I'm going to do. And it was really, I'm very thankful. So
you just mentioned that you like to do things by yourself. Is that because you want them to be done right, or you have hard time letting go, or why do you want to hold on to things?
Oh, I'm better about the perfectionist, cold control freak thing now, much better than I used to be. I used to definitely have that, like, no, I've got to do it or it's not going to get done right.
But isn't it for everybody? Like,
yeah.
like, isn't it like, I feel like every business owner that I've spoken to in the last decade, everybody goes through that in some capacity,
Right.
Especially when the growth of the business is substantial and fast. Right? We start with something that we built, and then you got to let go. You got to hire people. You got to allow them to make mistakes. You got to allow them to fuck up, and you still got to keep them employed, and you kind of got to solve the problems, but it's hard to let go, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And then in some cases, I can mention a bunch of things that I had that were difficult to let go of because I knew, as founder, head muckety muck, I could do those things the best. But it's like, if you want to grow, to your point, it's a classic entrepreneur story, right? You need to be able to delegate some things. Then on the other side, you had to look at things honestly and say, you know what, I'm not as good at this as that person. And if that person is willing and able, or even wants to do that thing, then why am I trying to hold on to it? Because I'm actually now the bottleneck. So all those classic business owner lessons, for sure. For me,
and the second one is hard, isn't it? Like acknowledging the fact that somebody does it better than you, and you actually tangibly need them.
Yes. And I think though, you can let your shoulders down when you first admit that on something, and you let somebody else do it. Then it's like, well, like, you let your shoulders down and go, like, that actually was way less stressful. It happened much faster, right? Like, they actually wanted to do it. They take pride in it. So then you're like, okay, that's a positive feedback loop. Let me see if I could do that again. Gets a little bit easier. But I think just in general, it's kind of my personality. Like, I don't want to put anybody out and, then, I'm beholden to them because I had to ask for help or something. So I just kind of like, I'll just solve it myself. And there's times when that's fine. Other times, though, again, it can become a limiting belief, and it can become a limit to growth. So
do you feel the same thing about instructors? I mean, you do have to trust them. You do have to let go in some sense that this class or this subset of classes or this program is going to be run a certain way to the certain standards that the expectations are being set from the top, whoever sets them, right? I mean, that's a sense of letting go too, right?
Yes, exactly. That's probably the toughest, where you want to empower people to grow. Like, one thing I don't have is this need to be the man in my academy. Like, I don't artificially want to, like, manufacture status where I have to be lording over above my assistant instructors, my black belts under me and everything like that. Like, I understand that if you grow, you should be allowing them a certain amount of leeway. Like, obviously you have your standards and you have your process, but you need to give them a certain amount of leeway for growth and to develop their own like they need to be able to test their own theories a little bit, as long as they're not coloring outside the lines of, you know, what we feel is very important for the structure of how we teach. But they need to be able to they need to be able to debate each other and to have conflicts of opinion about what's the better way to do XYZ. Like I want freedom for all those things to happen. I know, you know, Matt Thornton, like head of SBG, one of my very good friends, you know, he's talked about this as well. It's like, let people debate, let people apply the scientific method and try and come up with better ways, because that's how all of it evolved. But I'm not so worried about that. Like, I fully understand that if I have an instructor who's teaching, say, a couple sections a week and is doing a great job and is very popular and respected, there may be students that are only ever in that instructor's class and they don't ever come to my class based on their schedule or whatever. And so they're actually going to look at that instructor, who is one of my black belts, you know, they're going to look at them like as being their representative of the school and their whole experience and everything in terms of teaching. And I'm not going to be that important to them, and that's perfectly fine. Like, that's as it should be.
But many would see this as a downfall to you, right? I mean, you're the guy. You're the man. Like, your name is on the door, kind of, sort of. So you got to be in charge, no?
Right. Well, in charge is one thing, but when it comes to building healthy sub-communities within the larger community, I don't need to control every aspect of that, because I think that's when we slip over into a bit of narcissism, right? Like, like everybody has to understand. In other words, if you're finding yourself having to go, well, you know, he's my black belt, you know, he's under me or she's under me or something. It's like, dude, like, do you need to say that? Like,
why are we doing this? Yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, what is this really about? Is this really about you? No, of course. If it's just freewheeling and everybody's doing their own thing without any, you know, it's Wild West, like, recourse. Well, now you're going to have problems. Like that shit is going to hit the fan eventually. You're going to have, like, way too many cooks in the kitchen. But, you know, I think the main thing is, like, yes, it's your school. You do have to inspect what you expect. You have to provide training. You have to provide structure and leadership from the top. But at the same time, that student's primary experience of leadership is going to come from the instructor that they're working with. And the main thing, I think, is if you have a good culture, then that instructor has a good relationship with you, respects you. So, like, you don't need to be lording yourself over their relationship with those students in their class, if that makes sense.
Oh, no, absolutely. And we spent a lot of time last time when you were on the show talking about that, particularly how to drive the culture and how to guide those instructors. Have you noticed any particular changes since our last conversations in that arena and in that opportunity to guide these guys to really become ultimately better than us, right? Because that's kind of the leadership 101, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, we are building others to become better than us. I mean, we should be replaceable, no?
Absolutely, yes. And that will be inevitable because we age, right? So,
right. I mean, we all got expiration date.
Absolutely. That's always the goal, is to make your instructors, your students better than you, or at least, you know, as good as you faster, and then eventually better than you. Give them more, you know, the technology sooner. There's a whole other conversation there. But I think the only thing, I'm not going to say anything original here, but the only thing that is really just been reinforced maybe since our last conversation a couple years ago is it's just have uncomfortable conversations sooner. When it comes to, if you see something that's becoming out of alignment with what you want, that will eventually be weeds in the garden that grow and fester and become toxic. And when I say this, I don't necessarily mean that, you know, the other party is always bad, malicious, evil, anything like that. It's simply a matter of, we're not a fit. Like, in terms of what it is that you're valuing and what it is that we're valuing, like, you know, this isn't a fit, and nip that in the bud quicker.
Well, that's hard, isn't it?
It can be very hard because, you know, again, in our particular cottage industry that we have here, it's a very close relationship industry. People, it's not as transactional as you see people online now always saying, where they're like, dude, I pay for a service, I'm just going to blah, blah, blah. It's like, you and I both know that's not exactly it. It's like, there's more to it than that. Yes, it's a service, but so I'm not into, some of the really old school things about like controlling your students' lives and all that stuff. But on the flip side, it's like, I know that in my experience and all my instructors and all my friends that own schools and everything, like, we go way over and above what is on the line item of like what service we're providing. A lot of extra time spent after class, around the fringes. Every time you take time away from your family to go coach at tournaments, wrap somebody's hands, train a fighter, corner a fighter, something like that. Like, all these things compound over the years. Those are outside the scope of, you paid for that hour class this many times a week or something like that, and we sweat together and we confide in each other. People are coming and telling you about their personal circumstances, and, you have the sort of like the friend side of things as well as the instructor side. We all know this. So when it comes to that, I feel like we're in an industry where the roots go much deeper, the connections go much deeper than in most professions where emotions come into play, but not to this extent. You often have people that you're like, I thought we were going to be boys forever. And then you just see them growing like this, compared to like what your mission purpose is for your school. And you realize like, this is not healthy anymore. And then sometimes you see sort of this dynamic forming where it's kind of like a clique of all, there's always this like tiny little cluster of people that think it should be like this. And next thing you know, you've got a problem. So,
how do you solve these problems?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. For me, it's like address it right away instead of pretending that if you continue to be cool and everything's just going to sort itself out. It's like, no. When you start to see the signs, like I've seen in more of a corporate environment where people would have this saying, you probably heard it, but it's like, when should you fire somebody? Like the moment you start thinking about it. Yep. Like the moment you're awake at night, 2 nights in a row thinking about it, you probably already answered your question, right?
Yep.
And so I'm not necessarily talking about firing somebody, but at the very least to address it right away when you see something going haywire, because when your gut instinct and your observation are both kicking in at the same time, it's probably for a very good reason. So honest communication earlier, I think, would be it. For one of my faults, I think, and this is like just a little dots in the greater scheme of things over the years, but because we care, when those little friction points come up with people, you tend to dwell on, instead of the positive, you tend to dwell a little bit on the negative experience, because you're like, oh, like there's this friction with somebody that I thought we were going to be, golden forever, and they were part of the tribe here forever. And then you realize, well, but people are people. They're looking at the same set of circumstances through completely different lenses. They have different priorities. Sometimes you just need to have that uncomfortable conversation earlier, get on the same page, or respectfully say, I don't think we're aligned anymore. Still like you, but, I think you should go in another direction. And the earlier, the better.
But that's hard, isn't it? I mean,
it's very hard. Yeah.
I mean, like, especially if they are involved, if they are, they have some kind of anchor point at the business or at the academy, these things become very, very difficult.
Yes. But you just have to, I think the main thing there that makes it a little bit easier, it's never easy, but I think the main thing there that makes it a little bit easier is just to look at, well, what's the alternative? Again, the alternative is things only get worse when they're unaddressed. Yeah. So you're doing a service to everybody involved, not just yourself, but to them as well, to just say, let's get clarity around this. Let's get all the cards out on the table. And then we decide if we're going to continue to, move forward with some modifications here, or if it's just not a fit anymore and there's a better fit for you elsewhere. And that way we can avoid a lot of additional stress and heartache moving forward.
A moment ago, you said, in corporate, I've heard this, I've heard this so many times, but it's like the moment you lose sleep a couple nights in a row, you probably made your decision.
Yeah.
So true. But what about giving second chances or third chances or fourth chances? I mean, that topic often comes up surrounding this conversation, right?
Yeah. So when I say address it right away, that's why I said I don't necessarily mean firing.
Right.
What I mean is you see something happening, don't choose to ignore it, address it early. So that doesn't mean you have to get rid of somebody. They're not excommunicated like on the first,
You're
out,
executed immediately.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably instances where that's necessary too, but that's a tiny percentage, fraction of 1% of 1%. But in most cases, I think it's just being on it early, so that again everybody can get clarity around like, look, I'm kind of seeing this. I don't want this for these reasons. Where's this coming from, or what have and then give them a chance to voice it. You can address it, and then you say, so, how do we take care of this moving forward? Very simple. Like, let's make sure we get on the same page, and then you can set expectations around that. And then you give somebody, because humans are humans and they're not you, they're them. So you give a little bit of leeway and everything. But, to your point about second, third chances, but there also comes a point where you're like, okay, you can tell me something in words, but I also need to see the intention on the other side and the action on the other side. If I'm not seeing that, then at some point it just comes down to, this is not working. And you have to be honest about that. Or again, it just festers.
And unfortunately, I think every business owner at some point or another finds themselves in this position. Many choose to ignore it, and many are afraid of these situations. But I think we all find ourselves there sooner or later. Unfortunately,
100%.
Unfortunately, it is what it is. A part of being all of this. Let's pivot this one more time. Right before we get on, you brought up an interesting point of AI that is taking over our entire world, and soon we don't have to think about anything, and soon we're not going to have to do jiu-jitsu at all. We're just going to download it, right?
It'll be all a robot.
But jokes aside, you are dipping your toes into what you've been doing this for a few years now, right? This is a quite a long project at this point, but you have some interesting results that I'm hearing about, and I would love to pick your brain on this. What's going on with AI in jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, I mean, I could do this for hours. So
we have like 20 minutes.
I'll be sort of concise, right? So one thing kind of led to another, right? So I opened my school full-time 18 years ago. I had a program before that, but not a full-time. So full-time 18 years ago. And then as I got educated on promoting the business, which was, new, I was new to business. I was an academic and a martial arts instructor, personal trainer, but like not a business owner. So learning on the fly, okay, I need to learn how to promote my business, marketing, advertising, and then
the best part, this is what we love doing every day.
It's like pulling teeth, right? But then, hey, there's this thing called the internet, and everybody's like, now marketing and advertising started to move primarily over to the internet. And then you see like, okay, well, people are actually like doing things that they would normally only do in person and expanding their reach through the internet. And so I'm like, okay. So I started doing very basic internet marketing back around 2011, which was just my email list for 40 Plus BJJ. I had no idea what to expect. It had a good result, wound up creating that course you pulled up, the original, and like did really well with it, just part-time, because I was running the gym full-time. And then from there, also working with an SBG, with our business owners group, and seeing some big transformations in a lot of the gyms. Like one of my friends has an empire now. He was making $6,000 a month gross revenue, and now he's like multi-millions, 4 locations, real estate, all this stuff, just phenomenal. And that's just one story. So I was like, really started to get enamored of consulting in the same way that I like to help people with coaching martial arts. I like the consulting space. I feel like that's sort of just my thing, is take information, disseminate it clearly, and help people get results. I really love that. And if I can make a living doing that, that's great. So I transitioned to doing sort of like one remove from martial arts, but basically fitness and health professionals, doing consulting online for them. And then as part of the initiatives, I was working with a small group of people, really sharp, doing some different things from what other people were doing, trying to solve problems like we do in jiu-jitsu, business model innovation. And one of the things, we were early adopters of AI before ChatGPT hit. So this is like early 2021, before the release of like ChatGPT 3, where all of a sudden the whole AI conversation accelerated like it is now. It just took off. And so we were already doing some cool things around lead generation. And then that led into doing some of the product service delivery that I mentioned with the knowledge bases. And so I had this very intense project between 2023, 2024, where I was just, every day that I wasn't working on my martial arts school and everything, I was spending time talking to business owners between like 2 million and 200 million, or 2 and 200 million for the most part, and doing demos and just so much market research, hundreds of hours of market research, super intense. And I came out of that particular project with a completely different lens. Like, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a developer, but I speak the language now. And so basically I came out of that and I was like, you know what? I think the next project I want to do here is build something much more affordable than what I was just working with, because that would be a company coming in and buying an AI software for like $30,000 to $50,000, right? So then I went into, let me do something for my gym where I can do it very affordably, something that we can afford for the gym. And then if there's interest, I can expand this out to some other, to other people. And so a lot of people talk about custom AI this, custom AI that. If you look at your news feed, if you're getting served stuff for like AI solutions, everybody says custom. What that often just means is that they're just scraping your website, like a quick scan of your website. And even that, AI is so good now, it can do a decent job. But my big takeaway from all the experience that I had and all the conversations, the demos and everything, was the more personalized, the more custom, the better. And the more that you can kind of meet the market, like your prospects and everything, where they want to be, like where they can have the most kind of, like, they want the convenience of the bot, but they want the most human-like experience possible. I've got theories behind that, but I won't go into it. But in any case, I took that knowledge, I got my own developer team, managed to get very fortunate to get some good people really quickly that I vetted, and started to develop this, and then basically just created a full stack, like, marketing suite of all the best stuff, like lead generation. We've kind of got that sorted for people that need that want it like very affordably, where you can basically 3 clicks, you could launch ad campaigns on Facebook or Google. For people that like really want to scale up hard on that, I've also got a good friend of mine that's like a Google specialist and everything. So, we can kind of tie them into that. But as far as all the conversion stuff, like, AI is just so powerful. And I mentioned, like, we just came out with our most recent thing was the voice AI, where I'm just having conversations with it, with my team. And it's like at a point now where you call up, like, you're a prospect and you're doing the ring game, like if you're training your staff to answer the phone, and I'm throwing it every angle that I can, like a very complex type of thing, like, someone wants to ask a ton of questions. It's for you and you've got experience, but it's also for your daughter and your wife, and they want completely different things and have different levels of experience, and asking about the schedule and price and all this stuff. And it just handled it flawlessly and goes all the way through to booking. And so you think like, wow, like that can be taking place at 2 a.m. on Sunday when I have no staff available, or if my staff is on the floor and they can't be in two places at once. It's like this really robust experience, like handling all the conversions. So
do you think
reputation management, everything, we've got the full stack. Yeah.
Do you think where this is where all of this is going, where this human touch in a sense is being replaced by automation essentially?
So I think the big thing there, this is one of the fears. So AI is happening. There's no going back. You know, it's a tsunami. It's like anything else. You look at, do I need a website for my business? Do I really need to be on social media? Smartphones, that sounds like just a fact, you know, it's like you name it. This is arguably even bigger than all those, possibly all those combined. However, at the point in time that we're at right now, one of the things we always talk about, this is original to me. I think it was the CEO of NVIDIA that said this, but it's like, it's not so much that AI is going to replace the human, but a human who is smartly leveraging AI might replace you. Meaning, you need to embrace it just like you need to embrace the other emerging technology because it's here. And it's not a replacement per se, it's a supplement. But you'd better start to understand how to supplement because we're in a slipstream right now. And if you're not part of that slipstream, by the time you finally say, I've got to be in it, everybody else is already accelerated. They're at the next thing and the next thing, you know? So yeah, it is important. It's not the end all be all, but it certainly provides a tremendous amount of leverage in places that matter for your business, and it's only going to get better, and adoption is only going to increase.
Look, this is not any different. I mean, like, I know there's a lot of people against it, and there's a lot of pushback on some of these automations, but this is not any different than putting a capture code on your website. I mean,
of course,
instead of putting a phone number and people dial this phone number, now you put a capture, or you just click one button and it dials you on your cell phone. Like, all of these things we've done through so many levels of automation over the last couple decades that we just don't think about it because it's part of life. It's just, it is what it is.
It's like the other technologies I mentioned. There's always this objection, sort of like reactionary response. It's like websites. It's like what's the matter? People can't actually walk in and have a conversation with like you can't actually talk to a customer anymore. You need this thing. It's like, you know, well, how did that work out? You know, cell phones, it's like, do you honestly need to be on the phone 24/7 and be reachable? You know, it's all that stuff. Like there's always the, you know, pushback, but you have to you have to zoom out. That's what I always tell people, like zoom out and like, again, look at the first principles of what is actually going on here. And yes, we can talk about, there are always going to be some drawbacks to new technology, but when you know that it is happening, then you say, so what's the best application? And again, you know,
how can I use this?
Exactly. And how can I use it in a way that isn't just to capture opportunity, like there's a gold rush and I'm trying to get my little piece of the pie, but how do you do it in a way that actually provides value? So, you know, again, what I mentioned, like distilling everything down to the core, I had so many conversations with people coming into their experience with AI at all these different levels, and hearing objections, hearing people that were very proactive and were in the game and the full spectrum. And really one of the things, you know, that was a point of consensus when I really drilled it down and I, you know, pooled together all these conversations and transcripts and everything, is like, the markets are shifting. The markets have shifted. And now people want to have, like, basically their cake and eat it too. The new consumer is like, I want very high quality, but I want it on demand now
and cheap
and as personalized to me as possible and cheap, right? So it's like all those things. Well, okay, how do we do that? Good luck trying to do it only with humans unless you have an unlimited bank account, right? It's like, so where things are going is to be able to provide these things, quality, fast, convenient, you know, like, and and
So
with that level of customization is that's what I wanted to be out front on.
So, like, if you look in last couple of decades, there are these pivot points in jiu-jitsu evolution, if you will, which really changed the direction in which this whole thing is going from a hobbyist and then from a business perspective. You know, obviously the digital world is a big one, right? This is where YouTube came in, and really access to free information. You know, then, you know, some might say the BJJ fanatics and some of those subscription sites, more popular ones, really changed the direction as far as how the education is taking place.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Do you think that this AI curve will change the way how we teach jiu-jitsu, the way how jiu-jitsu is being viewed on the mat and off the mat?
It most likely inevitably will. I don't fully know what that will look like long term. I think short term, again, it's what we were early on. I was doing it more on the consulting side, but I've already started to implement some of this for my own academy. It's like a project I'm working on right now when I get, you know, some spare minutes or hours, is the knowledge bases that I mentioned, right? Where you can have, again, this much more convenient, robust, instant access to information. I mean, people already get that to some extent on platforms like YouTube, but this is another level to that, where you can have customized personal knowledge bases. So, you know, one of the things we were talking about is like, you know, look, I've got my own dedicated chat GPT, but it's Stephen AI. It's not the world's, you know, and so I think that's going to be coming soon, mainstream. You know, it already exists, but we were on that early. And then I think there's going to be other changes coming that we probably haven't even foreseen yet, for sure.
I'm thinking more 10 years or 20 years out. Do you think it will get to the point where instructors are no longer needed in a form that we are today, and this is being replaced in some kind of automation? I don't know. I'm just
I still think we're considerably far off from replacing the human, but there's no question that AI will come to a point where, you know, you could, it's going to be you on your very best day, at least, if not better, right? In terms of that. But I think, you know, we are still humans at this point, unless, you know, everybody's Neuralinked or whatever. I don't know exactly how that's going to play out. But at this point in time, in the near future, I think it's going to be, it's still going to be managed by a human, but it's going to be an accelerant, and it's going to be a quality enhancer. So I don't see really a major downside. I just think it's going to be different, but not like we're going to be obsolete in 10 years.
So what you're saying is we're not going to walk into the academy, there's like a hologram right in the middle of the mat, and he's teaching or she's teaching the jiu-jitsu. I mean, a lot of people make fun of this, but in some far stretch, there's a possibility, isn't it?
Oh yeah, there's a possibility, but still, like who's? I think even if that's going to happen, I think there's still going to be, again, that human element. So it's going to be a hologram of somebody that isn't just a, like it's not Professor X, like not X-Men, but like Professor X, generic, like a jiu-jitsu person that doesn't exist. It's actually going to be a person exist that is doing it, but you don't have to, you know, it used to be like you talked about popping a DVD into a machine. Now you pull up the video online. Now it might be the hologram, but it's still going to be a hologram of
But in some ways,
Thomas,
I mean, in some crazy ways, this could be another layer of monetizing on all of this. Instead of doing instructionals and putting them wherever they go, you could have that person almost present at your academy. I mean, you know, now we are talking about crazy stuff, but is it really that crazy?
No, it's not. It's not crazy. I mean, I think it's like new technology, and then in order of operation, it's like porn embraces it first, and then jiu-jitsu guys. Like, so,
Yeah.
the martial arts instruction will change with it.
Yeah.
That's always the joke, right? It's like every new technology, they figure out how to monetize porn first. When I first heard that, I can't remember even what it was, but it was so funny to me. But I've heard that like probably 10 times now as new stuff has come out. But I do feel like, especially not so much MMA, not so much kickboxing or whatever, but I feel like jiu-jitsu, that particular community tends to be pretty proactive on new technology. So I do expect to see it.
Interesting how all of this is evolving in a way. I mean, if I told you 10 years ago this is the topic we're going to be talking about remotely on a podcast, I don't even know if podcast existed that decade ago.
Right, exactly.
Like,
what was a podcast?
I know. So like, what would you think? I mean, like you out of your mind. What are you talking about? Right? I mean,
I mean, we weren't even planning on talking about that until 2 minutes before we went live, right? So,
right, exactly.
But you're right. It's like that wouldn't have even been a point of discussion before.
Do you think that jiu-jitsu in general is going to continue evolving, or this technology curve that is literally unfolding in front of our eyes, right? And I'm not even talking about AI, just technology in general, is really going to change and impact us how we view this? Like, is the viewership, the video content viewership, is it going to become greater than the in-person instruction? I mean, many are concerned about this, like. The amount of seminars and the revenue driven from seminars, the attention to the seminar has gone down tremendously in the last few years.
Yeah, I think that's unfortunate too.
And the same thing with private lessons, same thing with small groups, workshops, all that has gone down tremendously.
Yeah, I think, and this is one of the casualties. Again, we have to figure out how to navigate that, but you know, so when you look at this is sort of like a whole other topic, but when you look at what's missing, you know, one of my big objectives with any of my instructionals is, you know, there's this term which some people either are like misuse, or in other cases they kind of blow it off like it's some sort of pseudoscientific principle or whatever. But it's this term of connection, and I mean it in a specific way. There's a few different like types of connection and everything, but I mean it in the way that basically I believe, you know, it's attributable to Rickson Gracie and some of the developments that he made during his training career and everything, where, you know, as he himself has recounted, you know, there's like a lot of technique that's very good, it's very effective and everything, but what I did was I figured out the full connection for all the movements and positions in jiu-jitsu, which is a massive statement. But what I always say to people is, if you say that it sounds like kind of pseudoscientific, there's two things I always say. One is, of course you could quantify it, but it's going to mean different things in different contexts. So you'd spend so much time trying to actually come up with some sort of algorithm for how to quantify it that you should just be training. It's like, it's you know, it's like you'd have to map out moment to moment exactly what that means in that particular context. But if you feel it, you immediately go, okay, yeah, that's different. And so, you know, again, I attribute that to, it's a very small niche, but I attribute that to that particular lineage. There were some things that I'm very careful never to fall into the trap, which people will accuse you of like the old martial arts legend, in our case, Rickson Gracie, where you sort of deify him and everything. It's like, yes, he was the family champion for a while. He was by far the, like, you know, arguably the best guy of his era. But, you know, a lot of the stories, as opposed to old traditional martial arts legends and stuff, the stories are true because living people now will still tell you, like, people that we highly revere are like, oh yeah, he was different. It felt different. But then when you actually encounter like the handful of people that were able to learn this directly from him, have, as they, you know, as talk about, like, have him actually demonstrate on you, roll with you, put their hands on you to have you feel a certain thing, and just say like, oh, okay, so there was a different quality. Then more recently, we've got Gordon, and I remember like following his match with Wagner Hosha, and like Wagner's like, invisible jiu-jitsu is real. I just felt it. And if you actually have the eye, if you have the lens, once exposed to it, you can start to actually say, yeah, there it is. That's why my good friend Henry Akins, instead of using the term invisible jiu-jitsu, when talking about connection things, he uses hidden. And the reason why he said that is because he's like, you actually can see it, but only once you've been sort of trained to see it.
Yeah.
And so I've spent, always very curious about it, but I get bits and pieces. I've trained now a full 10 years, like obsessed, immersed in that. And I see it very well now. It's tremendously influential. And so one of my big objectives, I'm coming full circle, is whenever I do my instructionals, even when I can't put my hands on people, I do my very best to try and prompt them for what they're looking for, not just to do, but to feel, and give kind of a self-correcting mechanism there in terms of like how to train it, how to seek this. And then once you start to get connection, then you don't need to be spoon-fed it. You don't need like a prescriptive curriculum. You can start to problem solve along the lines of it, but it's the great differentiator. When it comes to private lessons and seminars and things like that, I think this is where there's some tremendous value there that's lost to the greater community, because especially when it comes to this, if you're very interested in what I'm talking about, which even if you had completely equal in terms of like effectiveness, but if you're looking for efficiency in your movement, and you're looking for being able to do more with less, you're looking for longevity, less wear and tear on your body, then ultimately a more efficient way will lead to more effectiveness too. But right, like at the very least, you are getting more with less, right? And so for people that really get that, it's like you should be going to that seminar and not just thinking you can get everything from a video where the sum is just, where it's just the sum of the parts, right? I think that's the complete wrong way to look at jiu-jitsu. It's like, just show me the best guy right now in competition. Just show me what moves they do, or what particular sequence they do. It's like, man, that's monkey see, monkey do. Like,
but some out there will argue this, why would I pay, 50, 60, 100 or more dollars for a 2-hour seminar versus where I can pay $50 for a video that I can watch over and over and over. And I think that's that generic argument.
Yeah. It's not either or. So my thing is, you can get information, you can mine information so well now. Like, we're very limited back in our day, right? It's like VHS tapes, back when you and I were first training. And not many of them at that. But so now we do have these vast resources, but at the same time, when you can actually disseminate first principles, you can actually teach connection. It's like there is a certain criteria there for, you have to feel it, right? So I can do that I've gotten pretty decent at that through the video format. Not many people are doing that. I do think that's a differentiator, to be talking about first principles and talking about connection and how to actually like identify it and train it and all of that. But there's no substitute for actually going in and having a coach or an instructor do it on you, or have you do it and to guide you to like, there it is. Oh yeah, I feel that, like the epiphany. It's always like, holy shit. Light bulb moment after light bulb moment, right?
Yeah.
And it's hard to get that through instructionals, and especially for the vast majority of people that haven't really experienced connection, or if they're talking about connection, what they really mean is like attachment, and it's not like, it's not pure connection. Then they don't even have they may be very good at jiu-jitsu even, but they don't have the lens to sort of even understand what they're missing. So it's one of my big things is like if you go to, there's lots of seminars and stuff, but for me, if I can go to people that can help me to deepen my knowledge and accelerate my knowledge of that, that is worth its weight in gold. Like I can take a few nuances, and that will be like my personal objective for my own training, which will then turn into curriculum for me to pass on principles and concepts to students. but that'll be my whole thing for like a year. I'll just spend on that. And I think it's a tremendous missed opportunity to just think that everything you can get from videos.
Yeah, and I think you just nailed just a second ago this important point, really being selective about what you do and how you do it. And we all have these people we look up to, the people we want to mimic, and regardless of our rank. But we always have those guys. Oh, I like this. I like his style. Let me pick this apart. And when we have those opportunities to meet them in person and just ask even questions, have a conversation, I personally feel these are irreplaceable moments that you will never get back. And to this day, I don't live with regrets. I feel like life is too short to regret things, but I will tell you, one of the handful of regrets I have is, and I said this on the show earlier, I was white or blue, I don't recall exactly, but Hickson Gracie came to Chicago area, and he did a seminar, and this is 20 years back.
Yeah.
And that seminar was $400
right.
20 years ago. And I was like, oh, hell no, I'm not paying that.
Right.
That was my response, okay?
Yeah.
And I tell you, to this day, I regret that moment.
Right.
Because this was my only opportunity to meet him. And, I'm still hopeful, but...
right. Yeah, I understand. I understand. Yeah. I think we've all got stories like that.
Yeah. Listen, what a great conversation. We've taken this very windy road all around the mountains and everywhere.
Yeah,
and
we're all over the place today.
All over the place today, but it was so great to really connect with you, and I'm really glad to hear that things are going very well on your side. And your representation of jiu-jitsu is so amazing that, again, I keep saying this, but like I wish there was more people like you, because this universe would be a very different place, and the jiu-jitsu community would be so much more rich and so much more positive.
Yeah, thank you so much. That means a lot coming from you, Thomas.
Oh, yeah, I appreciate it. I truly do. If anybody wants to connect with you, I mean, you have so many resources everywhere. Is there a central point where anybody can come to you and ask follow-up questions or connect with you or talk to, your recent projects or get some of the old stuff from you? Where's that at?
Sure. Right now, I'm on Instagram as Coach Whittier, Coach.Whittier, and you can find me on there. 40 Plus BJJ is currently in a transition. I'm kind of migrating over to another platform for like my email list and everything with my email lessons. So if somebody goes there right now, it won't be there, but it should be there soon. So that's 40, then the word plus BJJ.com. Instructionals, right now, everything's on BJJ Fanatics, with the exception of, so you can just go on there and search Stephen Whittier. You'll see all my instructionals for 40 Plus BJJ, my Pillars series, and then more recently, my First Principles Jiu-Jitsu series. The only exception to that is on SBG University is my Open Guard, First Principles Open Guard course, which was a big one. It's the full course, like multiple volumes, and also a seminar included in it. That's the only one that isn't on Fanatics. As far as if anybody's interested in what I was talking about, like if we have school owners or gym owners or anything here, that's interested in the marketing suite and the AI, you can either reach out to me on Instagram, or the site that will be live any day now is satoricoach.io. I think that's everything.
Sweet. And as always, we'll include all of the links in the show notes of this episode. So if you guys are listening to this, want to reach out to him directly, reach out to us directly, feel free. We'll always direct you where you need to do, wherever you need to find your journey. However we can help you with this amazing, amazing thing that we all call jiu-jitsu. Stephen, thanks for hanging out. Thanks again for visiting the show. Thanks for keeping in touch with me, and thanks for this amazing conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much, too. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to RŌL Radio. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to leave us a review and help us make the show even more amazing. For future episodes, check out our website and follow us on all major podcast platforms. Take care.